Okay, let's dive in. Because if you want to truly understand how any large organization really functions today, governments, corporations, you name it, you kind of have to go back.
Yeah, back to the basics, back to the thinkers who first mapped these things out.
Exactly. You need those core ideas that shaped how we even think about these huge complex systems.
And when we were digging into your source material for this deep dive, one name just kept popping up, Max Weber. He seems absolutely central, especially for administrative theory.
Weber, right. A name that for a lot of people immediately brings up, well, bureaucracy,
Yeah.
which often gets a bit of a bad rap these days, doesn't it?
It certainly does. But look, our mission here is to take your sources and pull out the really key aspects, the key words connected to Weber. We want to give you a clear picture of his main contributions based purely on the material you gave us.
And according to that material, his big contribution here was pretty groundbreaking. The source highlights him as the first person to develop a really comprehensive theory of bureaucracy.
Yeah, it wasn't just about using the word. The source credits him with being the first to properly outline its specific features, systematically.
So he didn't necessarily invent the term, but he's the one who really defined it in detail.
That's the picture the sources paint. He brought this rigorous academic focus to it, defined its characteristics, placed it in a broader theory of power and authority. That's why his name is so tied to it, this comprehensive framework.
Okay, so what was he actually trying to figure out? The sources talk about his focus on authority.
Yes, that seems foundational. Weber wanted to understand how authority is used, how domination actually works in societies and organizations.
And how does the source define authority in his context?
Pretty directly, actually. It's basically the ability to get things done, even if there's resistance.
Irrespective of resistance.
Wow!
That gets right to the core of power, doesn't it?
It does. And the sources are clear. He didn't just see authority as one single thing, he broke it down.
Right, the famous three types.
Exactly. One of his big contributions highlighted in your material, he categorized them based on where the power, the legitimacy comes from. First up is traditional authority.
Which sounds like what it is based on tradition, history.
You got it. The source says its basis is tradition, accepted customs, maybe inherited status, the whole this is how we've always done it's idea. Think kings, queens, tribal elders.
Makes sense. Okay, what's the second type?
That's legal rational authority.
Ah, this is the one grounded in rules and laws, yeah.
Correct. The source says its power comes from written or established laws, rules, regulations. Authority isn't in the person so much as the office or the position they hold, and it's supposed to be exercised according to those rules.
That sounds very modern state, very organizational.
It is. It's seen as the dominant form today.
Yeah.
And then the third type,
The more personal one.
charismatic authority.
Right, this is all about the individual, their unique personality, maybe their magnetism.
Exactly. The source defines its basis as the perceived extraordinary qualities of a leader. Almost magnetic, sometimes. But what's really key here, and the source points this out, is its strong situational relevance.
Situational relevance. What does the source mean by that exactly?
Well, it means that this kind of authority is really tied to a specific time, a specific context, maybe a crisis. And it depends heavily on the leader keeping up that perception of being extraordinary.
So it's less stable.
Potentially, yes. Because it's so personal and context-bound, the source notes it can be threatened if the situation changes or if the leader, falters or loses that perceived magic. It can be incredibly powerful revolutionary leaders, but maybe fragile long-term compared to tradition or law.
Okay. So 3 ways power gets legitimized.
Sure.
But authority needs structures to work through, right? It doesn't just exist in a vacuum. Is that where the administrative systems come in?
Yes, precisely. Weber looked at how these authority types actually operated through different administrative setups. For traditional authority, your source highlights 2 main systems he studied.
Okay, what were they?
First, there's patrimonial administration.
Patrimonial. Sounds like father or inheritance.
Kind of related, yeah.
Yep.
The source describes it as highly centralized. Authority flows from the ruler's own household, almost. It recognizes traditional things like family ties, age, and loyalty to the ruler is absolutely key. Important jobs often go to loyalists, people personally tied to the ruler.
So it's like the ruler's personal staff running the show based on loyalty.
That's the essence, according to the source. Like, the ruler's private domain just scaled up. And the second system under traditional authority mentioned is feudal.
Feudalism. Okay, now I'm thinking knights and castles.
You're on the right track. The source connects it to landowners, local power. It describes feudal administration as more decentralized, or at least comparatively autonomous compared to patrimonial. Power is spread out among these feudal lords, landowners with control in their own areas.
Based on traditional rights and maybe mutual obligations, rather than just direct orders from the top.
Exactly, more decentralized power rooted in land and local lords, but still fundamentally based on tradition.
Okay, so those are linked to traditional authority. What about legal rational authority? What's the administrative system the source connects that to?
And here we come right back to the big one. The concept Weber is most famous for, and that your sources really focus on: bureaucracy.
Ah, bureaucracy. The system built on rules. What are its defining features, according to the material you looked at?
The sources lay out several key characteristics of this ideal type of administration. First, it runs strictly on written or established laws, rules, and regulations. Everything's meant to be formal, codified.
Rules rule.
Basically, yes. Second, the bureaucracy itself, the administrative machine, is often headed by a non-bureaucratic head.
Meaning someone from outside the career structure, like a politician.
Exactly. Think elected officials or political appointees in a modern democracy. They set the overall direction, the policy, and the bureaucracy is supposed to implement it according to the established rules.
So there's a separation between the political leadership and the administrative nuts and bolts.
That's the idea the source describes. Third, people working inside the bureaucracy. They're associated on a permanent basis. It's not meant to be temporary work.
Which leads right into the next feature the source mentions. It's a career system.
Yep. You join, there's a path for advancement, ideally based on qualifications or merit, maybe seniority. And you have job security, tenure. It's professionalized.
Built for the long haul.
Yeah.
And the fifth feature, this one sounds important, maybe a bit controversial, impersonal detachment.
Ah, yes. Impersonal detachment. The idea is applying rules without personal feelings getting in the way, without favoritism.
Treating everyone the same according to the procedure.
That's the goal, as the source explains it. Officials should do their duties impartially, objectively, decisions based on the job, the rules, not who you know or how you feel about them.
On paper, that sounds incredibly rational, fair, efficient. But the source mentioned a downside to this impersonality.
It did. And this is a really interesting point from the source. It notes that this very detachment, this impersonality, could actually lead to alienation among the officials themselves.
Alienation? How so?
Well, maybe a sense of being disconnected from the people affected by their decisions.
Yeah.
Feeling like just a small part, a cog in a huge machine, rather than, a person dealing with other people.
That's a powerful thought. The human cost within this rational system. What else did the source say about what bureaucracy is?
It's described as an organized discipline system. It's made up of skilled or educated personnel, people chosen for their qualifications, and critically, they have access to information.
Information that maybe outsiders don't have.
Often, yes. And because they have this structure, the skills, the information, they can exercise power.
So it's a concentration of organization, expertise, information, and power. And your sources were pretty clear about the risks there.
It's very clear. A crucial point the source emphasizes is the potential for misuse of that power. The material states directly that it's possible that bureaucracy, even though it's designed for the public good, might misuse its power for its own private goals, or to benefit specific vested interests.
So the system designed for impartiality could actually become self-serving or corrupt.
That's exactly the warning in the source. This misuse could look like corruption, sure, but also maybe harassing people, manipulating things to benefit yourself, your family, your friends. Weber outlined the rational ideal, but the source suggests he was well aware of this potential dark side.
It really throws that tension between the ideal design and, messy human reality into sharp relief. Now, when Weber described these features, the sources kept using that term, the ideal type. Can you unpack that a bit? What does that actually mean?
Yeah, ideal type is super important for understanding Weber's whole approach, not just for bureaucracy. The source explains it's a mental construct, something the researcher builds in their mind. A pure type.
So like a perfect theoretical model, not something you find in the real world.
Exactly. And its relationship to reality is key. The source clarifies. It's based on reality, it pulls features from the real world, but you won't find the perfect ideal type existing anywhere.
No organization perfectly matches the textbook definition.
Precisely. The source had a great analogy. Think of a caricature, like a cartoonist drawing Usain Bolt.
Okay.
The cartoon exaggerates the key features, the speed, the pose, maybe the grin. You instantly know it's Bolt. It's based on him, but it's not a photograph. It highlights the essential aspects.
Ah, I see. It captures the core idea, exaggerates it almost, but isn't a perfect copy.
Exactly, and that's its purpose. This ideal type acts as a reference point, a benchmark. The source calls it a utopia, not meaning perfect paradise, but in the sense of being a model not found perfectly in reality. It's a tool for comparison.
So you compare real organizations to this ideal type to see how they measure up, where they differ.
Yes. In the real world, the source says you always find a mixed type. Organizations blend features of bureaucracy with other things, or the bureaucratic features are there but, diluted or distorted by other factors. The ideal type helps you analyze that mix.
It's a yardstick for analysis. It makes sense. And it also makes sense that these bureaucratic structures became so dominant. Did the sources say anything about why they emerged and spread?
They did. The source links the rise of bureaucracy to these big rationalizing shifts in society, specifically things like industrialization, needing complex coordination, democratization, needing equal application of rules, and the rise of the money economy.
The money economy. How does that fit in?
Well, it allows for standardized salaries, objective financial transactions, rather than, say, paying officials with land or favors, which is more personal and traditional. Money makes impersonal, rule-based administration easier.
So as societies got more complex, industrialized, democratic, money-based, bureaucracy seemed like the rational way to manage it all.
That's the connection the source makes. These big societal changes created conditions that favored these rule-bound formal structures.
Okay, and one last point, we mentioned potential problems like alienation or misuse of power. Did Weber, according to your sources, suggest any way to deal with those problems?
The source touches on this briefly. It mentions that Weber believed democracy could act as a sort of solution or corrective for problems within bureaucracy.
Democracy as a check on bureaucracy.
That seems to be the implication. However, the material provided didn't really elaborate much on how Weber saw that working in detail, just that he saw a connection there.
Okay, so democracy as a potential counterbalance. Got it. So let's pull back for a second, bringing this back to you, the listener. Why is understanding Weber, especially bureaucracy, actually relevant? Why spend this time on these, century-old ideas?
Well, because these ideas aren't just history. You interact with Weber's concepts or the realities they describe probably every single day. Understanding his framework helps you see the intended logic behind the organizations you deal with, your workplace, government agencies, banks, universities.
It helps you decode the structure.
Exactly. You can see the rules, the hierarchy, why things are supposed to work a certain way. You can spot the different kinds of authority maybe playing out as your boss following the rules. Legal rational. Is the company founder still calling the shots based on history? Traditional. Is a new team lead inspiring everyone? Charismatic.
And it also helps you understand the gap, right? The gap between that ideal type, the clean, rational model, and the often messy, mixed type reality we actually live in.
Absolutely. It gives you a lens to analyze why things might not work perfectly according to the rule book, why there might be inefficiencies, red tape, or even those problems of alienation or power misuse the source talked about. It helps you critically navigate these systems.
You can see the blueprint, like you said, which helps make sense of the actual building, warts and all.
Nicely put. Yeah.
Okay, so just to recap this deep dive from your sources. We've looked at Max Weber's really foundational work, his comprehensive theory of bureaucracy, its key features: rules, non-bureaucratic heads, permanent careers, impersonal detachment.
We covered his 3 types of authority: traditional, legal rational, charismatic, and the administrative systems like patrimonial and feudal linked to traditional authority.
We also talked about bureaucracy, as described in the source, this organized, skilled system holding information and power, but with that crucial potential for misuse noted.
And we unpacked the ideal type concept, that mental construct based on reality but not found in it, used as an analytical tool. Plus, how bureaucracy grew alongside societal changes like industrialization and the brief mention of democracy as a check.
It's definitely a lot to absorb, but these concepts are so fundamental for understanding modern organization.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Really core stuff.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, something to maybe mull over. Building on this idea of the ideal versus the real, thinking about Weber's ideal type, that perfectly rational, rule-bound, impersonal system, and contrasting it with the potential for alienation and misuse of power that the sources also flag. What does that ongoing tension tell us? What does it suggest about the fundamental challenge of making these large organizations we rely on not just efficient, but also genuinely fair and, well, human.
Something to think about next time you're filling out a form or waiting on hold, maybe.